Story 1. I never thought my wedding day would turn into an episode of Family Feud, but here we are. Let me give you some background on how this whole disaster happened. My fiancé and I had been together for 6 years before we decided to tie the knot. We're both pretty private people who value meaningful relationships over having a huge social circle. When we started planning our wedding, we agreed on keeping it intimate, only close family and friends who had been there for us through thick and thin. The venue we chose was perfect, a charming farmhouse with a beautiful garden overlooking the countryside. It wasn't cheap, but we'd been saving for years to make this day special. We spent months planning every detail, from the flowers to the menu, making sure everything would be just right. One thing we were particularly careful about was the guest list. My family is complicated. My mom comes from a huge family with dozens of cousins, aunts, and uncles spread across the country. Some I haven't seen since I was in diapers. We decided to only invite immediate family and a few close relatives we actually keep in touch with. This meant that many distant relatives wouldn't be getting invitations, but we figured they wouldn't care much since we barely know each other. Boy, was I wrong. 3 weeks before the wedding, my mom called me, sounding anxious. "Mom, your second cousin twice removed from your great-aunt's side just called me. She heard about the wedding and wanted to know why she hasn't received an invitation yet." Me? Who? I don't even know who that is. Mom, you met her at great-grandma's funeral when you were 5. She's the one with the unique laugh. Me? Mom, I'm not inviting someone I met once 20 years ago. The venue is already at capacity, and we've finalized everything with the wedding planner. Mom, I know, honey, I told her that, but she seemed upset. Just wanted to give you a heads up. I thought that was the end of it. The woman, let's call her cousin Karen, had called a few more times, but my mom kept giving her the same answer. Eventually, the calls stopped, and I assumed she'd gotten the message. Fast forward to the big day. Everything was going smoothly. The ceremony was beautiful, not a dry eye in the house. My partner and I were on cloud 9 as we headed to the reception. The wedding planner had organized the seating perfectly, a special, very important person table for immediate family, and several other tables for friends and extended family who had made the cut. We were just about to start the first course when I noticed a commotion at the entrance. A woman in a flashy, inappropriate for a wedding red dress was arguing with one of the ushers. It took me a moment to realize what was happening, but when the woman's high-pitched, distinctive laugh echoed through the room, I knew exactly who it was. Cousin Karen had crashed my wedding. I turned to my new spouse, who looked as confused as I felt. Me, that's the cousin I told you about. The one who kept calling my mom for an invitation. My spouse? How did she even find out where the wedding is? Me, probably from my aunt. She always posts everything on social media. Before we could decide what to do, Cousin Karen had somehow talked her way past the usher and was now scanning the room like a predator looking for prey. Her eyes landed on our VIP table, where my parents, siblings, and my spouse's immediate family were seated. There were 2 empty chairs reserved for us, the newlyweds. To my horror, she started marching straight toward our table. I quickly got up and intercepted her before she could get there. Me, excuse me, what are you doing here? Cousin Karen, there you are. Congratulations, what a beautiful wedding. Though I have to say, my invitation must have gotten lost in the mail. Me, there was no invitation. We're having a small wedding, immediate family only. She laughed that laugh again, waving her hand dismissively. Cousin Karen, don't be silly. We're family. Blood is thicker than water, you know. Me, we've met exactly once, when I was 5. Cousin Karen, and what a special meeting it was. Now, I see you have a lovely table set up there. I'll just join the family. Before I could stop her, she sidestepped me and headed straight for the VIP table. My spouse had joined me by this point, and we exchanged panicked looks. My spouse, who invited her? Me, nobody. She just showed up. We hurried after her, but she had already reached the table and was introducing herself to my bewildered in-laws. Cousin Karen, hello everyone. I'm the bride's cousin. So wonderful to finally meet you all. We're practically family now." My poor father-in-law looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. My mother was frantically trying to communicate something to me with her eyes, while my spouse's grandmother was clutching her pearls in shock. I took a deep breath and approached her again. "I'm sorry, but this table is for immediate family only. We don't have a seat for you." Cousin Karen: "Nonsense. There's plenty of room. Just grab a chair from another table." My spouse: "Actually, the seating arrangement has been carefully planned. There are other tables where distant relatives are seated. We can find you a spot there if you really want to stay." She looked offended, as if we'd suggested she sit on the floor. Cousin Karen: "I'm not sitting with people I don't know. I'm family. I changed your diapers once." "You absolutely did not." Cousin Karen: "Well, I could have. The point is, we're family, and family sticks together. You're ruining family unity right now. What would your great-grandmother say?" By this point, guests at nearby tables were starting to notice the commotion. Our wedding planner, a no-nonsense woman who had handled countless difficult situations, was making her way over to us. "Look, you weren't invited. We don't have a seat for you. I'm asking you politely to leave." Cousin Karen: "I'm not going anywhere. This is a family celebration, and I'm family." My spouse: "Please don't make a scene. This is our wedding day." Cousin Karen: "I'm not making a scene. You're the ones causing a problem by not welcoming family with open arms." The wedding planner arrived, assessed the situation quickly, and stepped in with professional calm. Wedding planner: "Is there an issue here?" Cousin Karen: "Yes, there is. These two are trying to exclude me from the family table." She wasn't invited. She just showed up demanding a seat at the VIP table." Wedding planner: "I see. Ma'am, if you weren't on the guest list, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to leave." Cousin Karen: "This is outrageous. I drove 3 hours to be here." Wedding planner: "Without an invitation, I might add." Cousin Karen looked around, seemingly realizing she wasn't going to get her way through arguing. Then, I saw a calculating look cross her face. Cousin Karen: "Fine. I'll sit at another table. Just point me to where the other, less important relatives are sitting." The wedding planner, looking relieved that the situation was diffusing, pointed to a table in the corner where some of my mom's cousins were seated. There was an empty chair there because someone had canceled at the last minute. Cousin Karen huffed and stomped off toward that table. My spouse and I exchanged relieved glances, thinking the crisis was averted. We thanked the wedding planner and went back to our seats, trying to enjoy our interrupted meal. About 15 minutes later, I noticed Cousin Karen was no longer at the assigned table. I scanned the room and spotted her near the kitchen doors, talking animatedly with one of the caterers. Something didn't feel right. I quietly mentioned this to the wedding planner, who was checking in on us. I don't like the look of that. What is she doing with the catering staff?" The wedding planner frowned and said she'd investigate. She walked casually toward the kitchen area. I couldn't hear what was being said, but I saw the caterer looking uncomfortable as Cousin Karen pressed something into his hand. Suddenly, the wedding planner stepped in, said something sharp to Cousin Karen, and took whatever had been passed to the caterer. The caterer quickly disappeared into the kitchen, looking relieved to escape. The wedding planner marched back to our table, looking furious. Wedding planner: "She was trying to bribe the catering staff to move her place setting to your table. She offered them $100 to make room for her with the real family." My spouse looked incredulous. My spouse: "You've got to be kidding me." Wedding planner: "I wish I was." "Don't worry, I've called security. They're on their way to escort her out." True to her word, within minutes, 2 security guards appeared. They approached Cousin Karen, who was now back at the distant relative's table, picking at her food and glaring in our direction. What happened next was both horrifying and, I have to admit, slightly satisfying. As the security guards quietly asked her to come with them, Cousin Karen erupted. "Cousin Karen, how dare you? I'm family. You can't throw me out." This is discrimination against blood relatives. The entire reception fell silent. Every guest turned to stare as Cousin Karen created exactly the kind of scene she had accused us of making earlier. Security guard, ma'am, please come with us quietly. Cousin Karen, I will not. I have every right to be here. More right than some of these friends, who probably barely know the couple. She pointed accusingly at some of our closest friends, who looked shocked. My father, who had been quiet throughout this ordeal, finally stood up. He's not a confrontational man, but when he does get angry, everyone listens. Dad, that's enough. You're ruining my child's wedding day. Leave now, or I'll personally make sure you never get invited to another family event again. Cousin Karen, you can't do that. I'm part of this family whether you like it or not. Dad, watch me. The security guards each took one of her arms and began leading her toward the exit. She struggled and yelled the entire way. Cousin Karen, you'll regret this, all of you. This family has gone to the dogs. No respect for blood ties anymore. As they finally got her through the door, a cheer erupted from the distant relatives' table, led by my mom's actual cousins who apparently couldn't stand Cousin Karen either. The wedding planner approached us again after things had calmed down. Wedding planner, I'm so sorry about that. Security will make sure she doesn't come back in. And don't worry, I've added her to our blacklist. She won't be able to cause trouble at any events we manage in the future. My mom came over, looking mortified. Mom, I'm calling everyone in the family tonight. She'll be blacklisted from every gathering from Christmas to funerals. I can't believe she did this. Despite the drama, the rest of the reception went beautifully. Everyone rallied around us, determined not to let one entitled distant relative ruin our special day. We danced, laughed, and celebrated with the people who truly mattered to us. Later, we found out that Cousin Karen had been pulling similar stunts at other family events for years, showing up uninvited, demanding special treatment, and causing scenes when she didn't get her way. Apparently, she considered herself the self-appointed keeper of family traditions despite barely knowing most of the family. True to my mom's word, Cousin Karen was officially blacklisted from all future family gatherings. The story of her wedding meltdown became legendary in our family, a cautionary tale about entitlement and boundary violations. As for us, we still laugh about it sometimes. What could have ruined our wedding day instead became one of those stories we'll tell for years to come, the day we stood our ground against the ultimate entitled person and reclaimed our special day. And yes, I still have the $100 bill she tried to use as a bribe. I'm saving it for something special, maybe a donation to a charity that teaches etiquette and boundaries. I think that would be fitting, don't you? Story 2. I've been working for this tech company for about 8 years now. Started at the bottom, coding in a tiny cubicle, and worked my way up to becoming the head of software development. It wasn't easy, especially coming from a small town where most people never leave. My parents weren't wealthy. Dad was a mechanic and Mom worked at the local library. They scraped together enough for me to go to college, and I've been determined to make something of myself ever since. The company I work for recently landed a potential deal with a major international client. This could mean expanding our operations overseas and bringing in millions in revenue. As the person who developed most of our flagship products, I was asked to fly out for the final meeting. The CEO decided to charter a private jet for a few of us executives since we were bringing sensitive prototypes and the timing was critical. I'd never flown private before. Always economy, sometimes business class when the company was feeling generous. So when I arrived at the special terminal for private flights, I felt a bit out of place. I was standing near the gate area, checking emails on my phone while waiting for my colleagues, when this woman in her 40s with expensive-looking sunglasses pushed past me. She strutted up to the counter like she owned the place, dragging a designer suitcase that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I didn't pay much attention until I heard her voice rising. "Woman, excuse me, I need to board first. I have platinum status and I'm entitled to priority boarding." The gate attendant, a professional young man in a crisp uniform, looked confused. Gate attendant, I'm sorry, ma'am, but this isn't a commercial flight. This is a private charter. Woman, what do you mean? This is gate 7B, and my app shows the next flight to Chicago leaves from here. Gate attendant, that would be at the main terminal, ma'am. This is the private aviation terminal. These flights aren't available for regular bookings. I looked up from my phone, intrigued by the conversation. The woman's face was turning red. Woman, listen, I have platinum status. Do you know what that means? I've flown over 100,000 miles this year alone. I have the right to be on this flight. Gate attendant, ma'am, I understand you have status with an airline, but this isn't an airline flight. This is a privately chartered jet for specific passengers only. By now, my colleagues had arrived and were watching the scene unfold with bemused expressions. Our CEO whispered to me that we should start heading toward the tarmac, but I was honestly too fascinated by this meltdown to move. Woman, show me the passenger list. I bet there are empty seats. This is ridiculous. The sky belongs to everyone. You can't just have private planes taking up airspace while regular people are crammed into economy. She was practically shouting now, and a security officer had noticed and was slowly making his way over. Gate attendant, ma'am, I need to ask you to lower your voice. This aircraft is chartered by a private company for their executives. Woman, that's exactly what's wrong with this country. Rich people shouldn't be allowed private flights. It's wasteful and elitist. At this point, she spotted our small group and my company badge. She marched over to us, pointing a finger in my face. Woman, you, who do you think you are, chartering an entire plane when there are perfectly good commercial flights? I was taken aback but managed to respond calmly. Me, ma'am, this is a business trip. We're transporting sensitive equipment that can't go through regular channels. Woman, oh, I'm sure. Probably just don't want to sit with the common folk. My CEO stepped forward. CEO, this conversation is over. We have a schedule to keep. The woman suddenly lunged forward, trying to push past us toward the door leading to the tarmac. Woman, if you won't let me on, I'll board myself. I have platinum status. Security quickly intercepted her, holding her back as she struggled. Security officer, ma'am, you need to calm down immediately. You're in a restricted area. Woman, do you know who I am? I fly every week. Check my account. The security officer asked to see her ID and membership card. She reluctantly pulled out an airline membership card that had a bold platinum across it. The security officer examined it carefully. Security officer, ma'am, this card expired 3 years ago. Woman, so what? Once platinum, always platinum. The security officer made a call on his radio, and within minutes another officer arrived. They spoke quietly while keeping the woman contained. Then the first officer turned to her. Security officer, ma'am, we've just checked with airline security. Your account has been flagged. There are reports that you've been boarding flights without valid tickets for months, using an expired card to sneak through gates during busy periods. The woman's face went pale. Security officer, you'll need to come with us. Airport police would like to have a conversation with you. As they led her away, she was still shouting about her platinum status and how unfair the world was. My colleagues and I boarded our flight, and I couldn't help but smile as we took off, thinking about how some people believe they're entitled to things they haven't earned. The meeting went perfectly, by the way. We signed the deal. Sometimes working hard really does pay off, unlike pretending to be something you're not. Story 3. I never thought buying my first home would lead to this much drama. After years of saving every penny while living in a tiny apartment, I finally had enough for a down payment on a modest 3-bedroom house in what seemed like a nice, quiet neighborhood. The real estate agent mentioned something about a homeowners association, but assured me it was mostly hands-off and just handled basic community maintenance. Boy, was that a lie? I'd been in the house for exactly 2 weeks when I decided to host a small housewarming party. Nothing crazy, just about 15 friends coming over on a Saturday afternoon for some food, drinks, and board games. I even printed out little invitations with my new address and sent them to everyone. The morning of the party, I was setting up the backyard with some folding chairs when there was an aggressive knock at my front door. When I opened it, I found a middle-aged woman with her arms crossed, tapping her foot impatiently. HOA President, are you aware that you're violating community bylaws? Me, excuse me. HOA President, I'm the president of the Homeowners Association. You failed to submit a formal request for an event permit. Any gathering of more than 5 non-residents requires prior approval from the board. I was completely caught off guard. This was the first I'd heard about needing permission to have friends over. Me, I'm just having a small housewarming party. It's not even going to be loud. HOA President, unauthorized events are strictly prohibited. You need to cancel immediately or face fines. Me, look, I've already invited everyone. It's just a few friends coming over to see my new place. HOA President, then I'll need a complete list of attendees, their addresses, and vehicle information. We need to ensure only approved visitors enter our community. This was getting ridiculous. I wasn't about to hand over my friend's personal information to this stranger. Me, I'm not comfortable sharing that information. This is my private property, and I'm not doing anything wrong. HOA President, as HOA President, I have the authority to enforce our rules. If you refuse to comply, there will be consequences. She stormed off, and I honestly thought that would be the end of it. My friends started arriving around 3 p.m., and the party was going great. We were playing games in the living room when suddenly there were police lights flashing through my windows. 2 officers came to my door looking very serious. Officer 1, we received a report about an illegal gathering with excessive noise, underage drinking, and possibly drug use at this address. I was stunned. We weren't even being loud. We had board games spread out on the coffee table and were eating chips and dip. Me, that's completely false. We're just having a small housewarming party. There's no underage drinking or drugs. The officers looked around and quickly realized the call was bogus. I invited them in to see for themselves. Officer 2, mind if we take a quick look around? Me, not at all. After a brief inspection, they were satisfied nothing inappropriate was happening. Officer 1, sorry to disturb you. We had to check because of the nature of the complaint. That's when I spotted the HOA president watching from across the street, looking smug. I pointed her out to the officers. Me, that woman called you, didn't she? She tried to get me to cancel my party this morning because I didn't get her permission first. The second officer sighed and exchanged a knowing look with his partner. Officer 2, is she the HOA president? Short hair, always wears those sweater sets. Me, yes, that's her. Officer 1, we've actually had several complaints about her making false reports. Let me speak with her. I watched from my porch as the officers approached her. Their conversation became increasingly animated as she gesticulated wildly. Eventually, one officer pulled out a notepad and appeared to be writing something. When they returned, they looked irritated. Officer 1, we've just informed her that filing false police reports is a serious offense. This isn't her first time doing this. Officer 2, after checking our records, she's called in at least 7 false complaints against neighbors in the past year. The department has already warned her about misusing emergency services. Me, what happens now? Officer 1, she's being issued a citation for misuse of emergency services. The city takes this very seriously. It diverts resources from actual emergencies. The party continued without further incident, but the story doesn't end there. 3 days later, I received a letter from the HOA board apologizing for the incident. They'd called an emergency meeting and voted to remove her as president after multiple complaints from other homeowners. Apparently, I wasn't her first victim. She'd been terrorizing the neighborhood for years. The icing on the cake? She was fined $500 for the false police report and ordered to complete community service. Now when I see her around the neighborhood, she quickly walks the other way. And those bylaws about unauthorized events, turns out they never existed. She'd been making up rules to control everyone. I've since become good friends with my neighbors, who were all too happy to see her power trip finally come to an end. We now have monthly block parties, no permission required. Story 4. I've owned my small Italian restaurant for about 5 years now. It's nothing fancy, but the food is authentic recipes passed down from my grandmother. We're known for our homemade pasta and pizza in our little suburb. When the pandemic hit, I had to pivot hard to delivery service to keep us afloat. Most of my staff had to be let go, and I was doing everything: cooking, taking orders, and even delivering the food myself. It was exhausting, but we survived. Even though things are back to normal now, I still do some of the deliveries myself, especially during rush hours when my 2 delivery drivers are swamped. I find it helpful to stay connected with my customers, plus it gives me insights into how the food travels and arrives. That's how I ended up at this fancy gated community last Friday night. The order came in for our specialty pizza and a pasta sampler, about $45 worth of food. The customer had put in a note asking for it to be delivered by 7:30 p.m. I noted the time when I left the restaurant, 7:10 p.m. The GPS said it would take 12 minutes to get there. Plenty of time. I pulled up to the address at 7:22 p.m., 8 minutes early. It was a large house with one of those doorbell cameras. I rang the bell and waited, balancing the hot bags carefully. The door swung open, and a woman in her 40s stood there with her arms crossed and a scowl on her face. Me, "Hi there, I've got your order from Italian Delights." She looked at me like I'd just tracked mud across her white carpet. "Woman, you're late. I specifically requested this be here by 7:15. I was confused. I checked my order slip again. Me, "I'm sorry, but the delivery note says 7:30. I'm actually 8 minutes early." Woman, "No, I said 7:15. This is completely unacceptable. The food is probably cold now." I opened the thermal bag to show her the steam still rising from the containers. Me, "The food is still hot, I assure you. Would you like to check?" Woman, "I don't need to check. I can tell it's been sitting around. I want a refund, and I still want the food." Me, "I'm sorry, but I can't give you a refund. The food is fresh, hot, and delivered before the requested time." Her face turned an alarming shade of red. Woman, "Do you know how much money I spend at your restaurant? I order at least twice a month. This is how you treat loyal customers? I'm going to leave such a bad review online that you'll lose business. Unless, of course, you're willing to comp this meal." It clicked then: this wasn't about late delivery. This was a scam to get free food. Me, "Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but I can't give you a refund for food that's been properly prepared and delivered on time." Woman, "Fine, I want to speak to your manager right now. Give me the number for customer service." I couldn't help but smile a little. Me, "Actually, I am the owner of Italian Delights. I'm also the manager and, tonight, your delivery driver." Her eyes widened slightly, but she recovered quickly. Woman, "Well, then you should know better. I'm calling your customer service line anyway. Someone needs to hear about this." She pulled out her phone and dialed the restaurant number that was printed on the receipt. I could hear my phone ringing in my pocket. I pulled it out and answered. Me, Italian Delights. This is the owner speaking. How can I help you? The look on her face was priceless. She stared at me, then at the phone, then back at me. Woman, this is ridiculous. I'm going to report you to the Better Business Bureau. Me, before you do that, I should mention that our delivery tracking system records all delivery times and locations. I'd be happy to email you the GPS report showing I left the restaurant at 7:10 p.m. and arrived here at 7:22 p.m., well before your requested delivery time of 7:30 p.m. She sputtered for a moment. Woman, just give me my food. Me, I'm afraid I'm going to have to refuse service. Our policy allows us to decline service to customers who are abusive to our staff. I'll be issuing a refund for tonight's order, but you won't be able to place orders with us in the future." I placed the food on her porch step, turned around, and walked back to my car. As I was driving away, I could see her still standing there, mouth open in shock. The next day, she posted a long, one-star review online about how terribly she was treated. What she didn't count on was that one of her neighbors had witnessed the whole thing from their driveway and commented on her review with exactly what had happened. The neighbor's comment got hundreds of likes, and other local business owners started chiming in with their own stories about this woman trying to scam them. Her review ended up bringing us more customers who wanted to support a small business standing up to entitled behavior. Sometimes karma works in delicious ways.